Oh man, I know it's been a few hours. I'm recording this just a bit after I've processed waking up, taking a shower, and just rereading and scrolling through Twitter theories. And bro, this is one of the greatest chapters of all time. Bro, how has Oda done it to where the last 3 years in a series with so many incredible classics, in a series that I'm so attached to, especially when it comes to the things that have, a lot of the stuff have shaped me in who I am, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of these moments have shaped my tastes and stories, have shaped who I am as a human being, have shaped what I decided to pursue as a career. And for in the last 3 years, for Oda to give us back to back to back years that I, without question, have my chapters of the year of each year. And I don't even know if this is gonna be my favorite chapter of the year. That's how I know that's how you know this year's about to be crazy. When this is in my top 10 favorite One Piece chapters, and I'm not even sure if it's gonna end up being the chapter of the year. When you give me the Gear 5 chapter in 2022, when you give me the 1102 Kuma chapter, and now you give me this sensational, jaw-dropping, mind-bending, can't help but think about it, could barely sleep processing it. I mean, this is, like I said, I don't know where it lands in my personal top 10, but I think this is my favorite spread, my favorite panel thing that Oda's ever drawn. This is sensational, man. This is sensational in so many different ways. Most of which is actually explored in a comment or in a tweet that I saw this morning from my boy, 3 Skull Joe. But before I read this comment, I just want to say, because I saw in the last video that we did like this last week, that some individuals thought that I did not react to the latest chapter and just released the video last week talking about the chapter. I react to every single chapter. Maybe YouTube doesn't push the videos, but I do react to every single chapter. And so if you go into the live section over on the channel, or if you go into the playlists for the One Piece chapters, you will find each and every single chapter reaction. Trust me, I react to every single One Piece chapter. It is what we do here on the channel. And so if you missed out on last week's chapter reaction, like I saw some people in the comments said they did, it will be over there in either the playlists or in the live section, as well as for this week's chapter. If you missed this week's chapter reaction, even if you don't watch the reaction itself, I highly, highly, highly recommend, at the very least, listening to segments of our discussion after the chapter, because the chat was on fire last night, man. I have to give a huge shout out to the community that showed out last night with some of the greatest theories that I've ever heard, man. So many phenomenal interpretations of the page, of the chapter. Just, y'all cooked last night, man. And it's going to be a great time on Sunday when we do our afterthoughts, and we have the Viz version to be able to compare to this and continue to discuss the things that we've that we will continue to learn and see and continue to think about and process throughout the next couple of days. This is definitely the type of chapter that will undoubtedly be at the topic of discussion for quite some time. And I feel like the more we bounce ideas off of other people, the more different things could potentially come to fruition, the more different interpretations and things, even when it comes to just one segment of this particular page, maybe even this chapter, because this chapter was chock full of so many different interesting things. But of course, I do want to focus here on the final page. When we do the afterthoughts on Sunday, we'll definitely continue talking about like the Cerberus and and what that means for like the differences between how the individuals up in the Holy Land, specifically the Gorosei and the Holy Knights, utilize their fruits. Now that it is confirmed, as we talked about last night, that I think it was Akash Panda that brought it up, that the Cerberus thing, similar to the Seiji Garcia Saturn, Zoan monstrosity, as well as the other members of the Gorosei, never got a Devil Fruit Oda box, showcasing the ability. Same thing for the Cerberus. And so there's definitely a connection there, and it's going to undoubtedly have something to do with what we're seeing here in this final spread, and the origin of fruits and things of that nature. As a matter of fact, there's even a segment here we talked about last night with like the god of the forest who, of their magic nurturing its devils. There's no doubt in my mind that that is talking about the origin of fruits, which is going to be so very interesting when we get to that. So yeah, it definitely has something to do in that regard. And then obviously the evoking the wrath of the sea god and things of that nature, and how all of that happened. Cannot wait for that. Cannot wait for that. But that'll be a topic of discussion that we'll continue to talk about in the afterthoughts, as well as the aspect of Luffy's dream, which is with the little kid's dream thing. I'm at a loss for words to how incredible this has been handled so far. From the episode 1015 segment with Yamato and the chapter 1000 stuff, to chapter 1060, and now with last week's chapter with Hadruddin, and in this week's chapter with the different possible connections to Luffy's dream that we are seeing both in this final panel as well as the panel with Ripley and this random kid who may have just changed the course of One Piece community history forever. It's beautiful from a, like someone brought up in a comment last night, from a meta-contextual standpoint of a literal kid like Ichiro Oda that that went out of his way to be to create this wonderful story after being inspired by something like Vicky the Viking and things of that nature. And for an Elbaf that is inspired by Vikings, for him to put this there at the centerpiece of that, a kid, Ichiro Oda, having the dream, to, after watching Vicky the Viking, to go out and create a story that resonates with people the same way that that resonated with him, is so incredibly interesting and fascinating to me on a meta-contextual and a meta-narrative standpoint. But when you bring it into the actual narrative and you start thinking about who this kid is, the connection to the Luffy and Roger dream, the connection to what could potentially be happening at the end of the series, all of that is so incredibly fascinating to me. It's something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, but it is not going to be at the central focal point of what we're going to be talking about today in this edition of I Can't Stop Thinking About This Flipping Chapter, because we have to talk about this final panel and what I believe makes it so special, and the different things that I've read today that even continue to elevate it beyond last night. And last night, like I said, the more that we continue to discuss it, the more I loved it. The more interpretations we got from it, the more I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And I'm going to give you a quick example of this right now. And so last night, I came up with the interpretation. So we're gonna go over to the right side of the page here when we're discussing the little robot individuals. They're the little humans that you see bringing up this little glowing thing upwards towards this gigantic monstrosity on the right side. So I'm gonna give you all an example of Joe's thesis statement here, which I completely agree with in regards to this chapter. So Joe's thesis statement that I could not agree more with, and it's actually why I believe this is probably my favorite chapter, or I'm sorry, my favorite panel in the entire series, my favorite spread in the entire series, is that Joe says, Oda has done something really clever with this mural. He has us arguing over different interpretations in exactly the same ways that giants in the story disagree about. And let me give you an example of this, and then let me tell you why this means so much to me on a personal level. So, last night, just off of this is just a small segment of the mural. Every segment of the mural has like a billion interpretations that I've seen, both today while scrolling through and seeing theories, and last night. So many different interpretations. But just talking about the little dudes that are carrying this thingy, right? I'm going to give y'all an example of what Joe is talking about here. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of when I initially saw this, especially after I went back and within the stream last night and read the NL cover story. And while reading the NL cover story, I saw the little automata dudes from the underground colony up there in space from the moon, and how that entire sequence reminded me of the civilization we see on the right, and how they could have potentially been using that in order to fuel something like this ancient weapon that we're potentially seeing on the right side of the page, right? And or Uranus or things of that nature. And so I found that to be extremely interesting, especially if we're looking at it from a first world thing. And NL's cover story really feels like a first world thing. You look at those hieroglyphics, you look at the way that whether it be the Lunarians or the winged individuals are represented within those pages, and in particular the way the Arc Maxim and how the moon is, how the little crater on the moon, and how the Arc Maxim is either going to the moon or coming down from the moon. A lot of different, very interesting things, but the NL cover story for me, especially after what I've read here, feels very, very first world. And so after reading the NL cover story again last night on stream, which I have to thank y'all for being patient with me as I read through the cover story again for like 20 minutes. But that's what I was like, okay, that might be my interpretation of what that is. That what we're seeing on the right side of the page is what we saw in the NL cover story with the little dudes, right, within the factory. Now, what I find so interesting about this is that immediately afterwards, someone in the comments, I don't remember if this was before or after, someone within the chat said that this could potentially be a comparison to Wano, and how the individuals that are here are all housing their prayers for Nika. So everything we're seeing here is like their prayers for help, similar to like a Wano, like defeat the big scary dragons, the lanterns. And I was like, oh, that's so incredibly beautiful, and parallels so well to something we've already seen. I could totally see that. So right then and there, my interpretation versus another person's interpretation, both equally as valuable, at least in my estimation. Then, one that I didn't even think of is Joe's interpretation, which Joe's interpretation is that the little dudes that we're seeing here carrying this thing on the right side of the page is one, goes up the elephant that has the Noah, which we assume is Zunisha or something of the sort. We see the little dudes, and Joe counts exactly 19 of these dudes. The 20 original monarchs minus Lily paying tribute to Emu in exchange for divinity. That interpretation, for me, is just as valuable as the one that I heard in chat last night, as the several that I've seen throughout the day today. And that, to me, showcases the beauty of this final panel. That in and of itself, comparing that interpretation, the interpretation that I just spoke of last night with the prayers, the interpretation I got from rereading the NL cover story, this, in just that small segment of this panel, of this spread, represents what makes this page so special. It represents what has made Elbaf so far special. It represents what has made One Piece to this point special. And that is that through the... Now I'm going to talk about things from like a meta-narrative standpoint. For me as an individual who truly values stories, and stories that can have an impact on people, there are multiple instances of something like this being shown throughout the series. It's why I value Yamato so much as a character. It's why I value the Mont Blanc Noland so much within the Skypiea saga, and why I continue to value stuff like the Odin flashback, or when Vegapunk was talking about whether Joy Boy was or whether Joy Boy or Emu, which side was on like the good side or the bad side, remains to be seen. Those types of things resonate with me so deeply, because as someone who believes in the power of story, as someone who believes that stories can have a real impact on people, it's murals like this that truly bring that into the forefront. Because this is drawn by a child, and this child's drawing is still being talked about today within the individuals of Elbaf of what these things could potentially mean. And especially when they are read along, this mural being read alongside the Harley texts. And the Harley texts are things that have been passed down from generation to generation, impacting them based on what they've lived, what they've experienced, their different interpretations. And that is storytelling, man. That is the beauty of stories and how they impact people differently based on what they've experienced and the different things that they can possibly come up with for what this could potentially mean. It's what makes stuff like creation stories so interesting. It's what makes stuff like end of the world prophecy so interesting. So many different interpretations of what things could possibly mean. All of that stuff is incredibly fascinating. But when you bring the element of stories and how stories can impact people and have them discussing things amongst another, the value, the tangible value of what these things mean to people, that is why I love this final page on a personal note. Because y'all know how much I value the importance of storytelling and how that can truly have an impact on people. And so, like Joe said, when you bring up a mural that has in narrative a value in terms of them discussing what this could potentially mean from generation to generation, they all have completely different interpretations. And then you have the way that we in the actual world read this story, see this mural, read the Harley text, and we have the exact same disagreements, the exact same different interpretations. That to me is the most beautiful, both meta and within story representation and understanding of what stories can actually do, the power that they hold. And I love that so much, man. Y'all have no idea. This means as much to me as the People's Dreams Never End page means to me. And that page completely changed the trajectory of my entire existence, right? Like this panel, this mural has that same type of value for someone who values stories in the way that I do. And I just adore it. I adore it, especially when we're looking at it from the perspective of a child who drew all of this, man. A child who was either seeing visions of the future and decided to draw all of this out, as we talked about last night, or a child who was drawing stuff that was taking place in real time, similar to the way that I drew this when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid and I was fascinated by Yu-Gi-Oh! And wrestling and Star Wars and Dragon Ball, I drew this. This was one of my earliest drawings because I was combining a whole bunch of my favorite things, of the heroes that made up my existence. The only way that I could process all the information as a kid was to draw it out. Were they good drawings? Absolutely not. But by the sweet mother of Flagnars, it meant something to me because I was bringing together all of these different things that were incredibly important to me. And so if we're looking at something like that through the lens of a child who was potentially living through either specifically through the second world stuff, but maybe hearing the rumblings of what took place in the first world, right? Seeing how that has directly impacted his life and or her life and what they've done and maybe their parents and their grandparents, but then what they were truly living in that point in time in the second world, and maybe with the stuff that was to come through like the prophecies and things of that nature. All of that influencing this massive mural drawn by a child who was influenced by potentially a multitude of different things, all connected to this one dream. And so what I find so incredibly just interesting in regards to the child's perspective on this is that is what feels most mysterious to me of all, is the motivation behind the child drawing this, the reason for the child drawing this. Because as we talked about on stream last night, and y'all were definitely cooking in that, with a child normally having to draw or write something out or act something out in order to process that information, that most certainly could be what's taking place here, whether it is, like I said, a vision of the future, a vision of what's actually happening in real time, or something of the past. they're all equally as valuable because they are coming from the lens of a child, and the child does not have the a child doesn't have the filter of logic, right? The filter of something that like, to them everything is possible and anything is possible. To them, everything that we're seeing on this page, even though for me, for sure, all of this most certainly either happened and or is going to happen, literally as it's seen. It also has beauty in regards to someone whose imagination is limitless, right? Like a child, someone like a Luffy, right? Someone who is able to utilize his Gear 5 ability, or even the Gomu Gomu no Mi / the Nika fruit to its highest extent because their imagination is almost unlimited, that we're able to see what it's truly capable of in a similar way. That's how it is with this mural. Someone whose imagination, someone whose creativity or their things were limited, might not have drawn something like this, right? But the fact that this came from the lens, from the eyes of a child, it allows us to hit just that much harder because they believe in all of this 100% wholeheartedly, and because they believe, we believe. And so, unbelievably beautiful stuff to me, man. Unbelievably beautiful stuff. Now then, with all of that being said, there are a few things that I didn't get a chance to talk about last night that I've been thinking about this morning, especially as I was scrolling through and seeing other interpretations of this entire mural. The first of which is, man, I don't care if the left side represents Imu and the Gorosei versus Nika and the squad. I don't care if it represents Imu and the Gorosei versus Joy Boy and the squad. I don't even care if it's Imu and the squad versus Luffy and everyone that we've met on this entire journey. The fact remains that all three are equally viable to me, and that Instant Messenger Sama holding this sun is, I could understand as being an interpretation of either Nika, Joy Boy, or Luffy utilizing literally everything that they possibly have to take out this one sun-eating, all darkness rising monstrosity with wings that we see on the left side of the flipping page, man. Which I most certainly believe is Instant Messenger Sama with the Gorosei under him. Instant Messenger, yo, Imu is built different, dude. Look at the left side of the page. Bro, you see all of those characters, and it raises Joy Boy's stocks for me as well. Joy Boy's stocks for me were already on a completely different level. Already. I mean, especially after the chapter when his Haki by itself, his Haki from 800 years ago, brought the Gorosei, sent the Gorosei flying all the way back to the Holy Land, took them out of their forms, and brought Imu down to their knees. I mean, phenomenal stuff, right? Phenomenal stuff. Hype out of this world. And truly put Joy Boy on the level. Same thing with chapter, I believe it was 1115's panel when it showed Joy Boy boxing all the 20 kings, right? Like, it was just going and going crazy. But you truly get to see how incredible Joy Boy was by having like a visual representation. If this truly is the second world being represented here. And like I said, I don't know if it's the second world, the first world, or the third world. Nika, Joy Boy, and Luffy are at the center. The centerpieces of each of these battles. So if this truly is Joy Boy, though, from the second world, how insane is it? How insane is it that you see all of these different things? We're talking all the different races, all these different armies. Representatives of so many different nations, potential giant robots like an Emyth or maybe even that's Pluton. Like I saw a thing earlier that I thought was really interesting. From Naoki Urasawa's Pluto, when you actually see what Pluto looks like within the manga, it looks very similar to the robot dude that's here. Loki or Loki's ancestor, Laboon, or whatever it is. All of these individuals are following behind one, and man, they're all following behind Joy Boy, bro. And if we're looking from the third world, they're all following flipping Luffy, man. And so it raises extreme stocks there. You know, extreme stocks. Like I said, I don't care who it is. Extreme stocks in all three fields. And it's so hype. Because it's like, Nika ain't looking at the other ones. Imu's not looking at the other ones. He's looking directly at Joy Boy. Like, oh, that's the one I want. That's the one I want. You know what I'm saying? And so, you have him holding the sun in his hand, which we assume is the Mother Flame, with Joy Boy at the center. And so it's like, the stocks on both of them have been raised just off this panel alone because you're able to visualize it. How insane that flipping war was and or is going to be. Bro, Instant Messenger Sama had to box all of them and won. Emu won, y'all. Emu won. Confirmed by the sacred texts. Deified himself after the victory, causing the wrath of the sea god. He won. We don't know what the circumstances were behind the win, but the fact remains, Emu won and has remained at the top for 800 years. It's like we've been saying this, we've been talking about it, but to actually visualize it here, you get to see how insane that is. Insane. Once again, looking at this, from this either being the first world with Nika versus Emu or the second world of Joy Boy versus Emu. Either way, this is nuts. 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 Now, we bring this into the third world perspective. And it reminds me of a conversation where Dak and I did a stream a long time ago. And I believe I also talked to Cole about this as well at some point, but that the final battle in One Piece, when we have Luffy and Emu boxing, it's gonna be something that captures the entire world, right? Like where the entire world is gonna see this battle taking place, whether it ends up being a Gurren Lagann-esque thing where giant Luffy versus giant Emu, as we see him on this side of the page, and for the entire world to see, that remains to be seen, right? Where if the scale is literally the entire world seeing these two box, which is the most hype stuff you could ever possibly imagine, right? Gurren Lagann style. Or if it is that it feels large scale because the fate of generations upon generations upon generations of losses, of failures, of individuals who have attempted this before, now on Luffy's shoulders to see if he's the one that could actually pull this off, right? It feels very large in scale in both aspects. But in terms of just the scale of battle, we understand that these two battles in the first and second world ended up destroying it, as was foretold. I think it was last week's chapter, that the world has been basically reset twice and destroyed twice. And so after these massive wars took place, so what that tells us is that the third battle, as Whitebeard said, is going to have the capability of turning the world upside down, and it almost maybe in a literal sense, right? Where it's going to capture each and every single nation, no matter if they want to be a part of it or not. Everyone is going to see the consequences and the aftermath of this ginormous battle that's going to encapsulate the entire planet. What this page visualizes to me, and what makes me so excited to see what's going to happen in the final saga. This is the most final saga panel ever. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, whether it represents the first, the second, or the third world. But if this truly is talking about the third world aspect of this, bro, you look at this and you see a Luffy. You see a Laboon, you see a Loki, you see the giants, you see the fishmen, you see the minks, you see the Tontanas, you see the individuals from Wano. Like, you see so many of these characters all fighting against Emu, and it's like, bro, it's so hype. It's so insanely hype, bro. Like, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this potential battle ever since Luffy got Gear 5 and we saw Emu's abilities in 1085, because what it showed me is that it's going to be a very cartoony, over-the-top battle, because Emu's abilities feel very, very like dark Looney Tunes, right? Like, just based on what we saw from the battle against Sabo. So what we have is like the evil Toon World versus Looney Tunes, right? Shout out to Maximilian Pegasus. But what we'll have is like those two boxing at the highest level, taking out the entire planet. Is going to be feeling what is what the aftermath and the rumblings of that battle. But what this spread lets you see is how that can be shown visually, like how it truly feels like it's going to encapsulate the entire planet. And so that's something that I did not get a chance to talk about last night, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it as I woke up today. Regardless, like I said, whether it's Nika, Joy Boy, and or Luffy, the idea of this large scale battle that impacts the entire planet, bringing all of the races into the picture is just so incredibly fascinating to me. So incredibly fascinating to me. Another thing that I haven't been able to stop thinking about is the fact that, going back to that little factory thing where we see them bring these, whatever those things are, we see that they resonate both on the right side, that some of them have gone even as far as up as to reach the moon, while on the left side we see that those very same things are also within this battle on the left, these little cloud-like things that were created here. So all of that stuff is extremely interesting, because it could obviously mean that this is maybe the energy source that fuels the ancient weapons, the energy source that allowed people to go to the moon, the energy source that allowed the sun and the original mother flame and things of that nature, as we talked about last night. But so much of that stuff, it fascinates me, because it's like it all originated from this factory thing that we're seeing here on the right side of the page. It all originated by mankind's own sins, which is something that obviously is a massive thing that's within the story already, and we're already seeing that the representation of that is within these three poems. And Emu doing one thing led for the fruits for the sea god to do the things that they did to the fruits, and the way that the people their prayers allowed the flipping Nika to rise and things of that nature. Like, so many of the things that the Zunis's apology, so many things that humans have done leading to the consequences of their actions, even if they didn't mean, obviously, even if they have good intentions or whatever the case may be, it ended up creating something potentially catastrophic. And so that's what fascinates me so much with the thing that we see all over the place, right? Where them creating all these things in the factory potentially led to the ancient weapons, potentially led us going to the moon, as well as the giant large-scale battle that we see on the left side of the page. If we're looking at this from the perspective of it being a first, second world-esque mural. But that's, once again, that just goes to show the beauty of this entire mural, because then you go over and once again we see the panel right here with the Arc Maxim coming down and striking what appears to be Zunisha that's housing the Noah. And it's like, is that in the time of Joy Boy, and it led towards the apology that and the punishment that was head off for Zunisha, or is that foreshadowing for what's gonna happen in the future, whereas Zunisha's heading over to go pick up the Noah once more, and we're seeing some sort of prediction, or I'm sorry, a prophetic thing of NL coming down. I don't know, man. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's that type of stuff. Last night we talked about the big dragon serpent thing on the top, potentially being Kaido, and or the red line, which the red line thing is very, very fascinating. I mean, we maybe the comment of the night last night was Fox Tamer MGO's comment on the first world, second world, and third world talking about how our biggest clue towards the One Piece, right? With the red line, the calm belt, and when these two things meet again, like what was it? I think it was east and west, and north and south. And then once the barriers to that have been lifted and those all are able to meet again, then all the stuff in the third world will take place. And goosebumps, goosebumps just saying all that. But it's just so incredibly fascinating to me, man. I don't even know what interests me the most. This all equally fascinates me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm so fascinated as well by the symbols that we see on the flags of the individuals here, the humans, right? Because all of the humans have their own flags, but they're just slightly different from the others. You know what I'm saying? Some are vertical, some are horizontal, some have like their colors inverted, but they're all similar in their own ways. The way that the child is able to interpret something like the giants and the minks and like Poseidon or things of that nature is just so incredibly interesting. Then this whale that's flying up in the air, it's like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Are we going to see, to like how the theories have have talked about before, like a flying whale ship? I know that I believe is a theory that I've seen thrown around for Pluton, but like a potential big, humongous flying whale, whether it's like a mechanical whale or not, or whether that is just Laboon, and it like. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's so incredibly fascinating. Loki in the middle. Like, what does that mean? Is that Loki's ancestor? Is that going to be our Loki that ends up joining us? I remember a comment last night said that Loki could end up being Luffy's Loki, and that, or I'm sorry, Luffy's Odin. And Loki's gonna end up following us on our journey after this to go see all this through to the end, which is, that would be so flipping peak, man. And then obviously in the midst of that, one of the things that fascinates me the most about this entire mural are the monstrosity on the right that's breathing fire, as well as the little dragon thing. The dragon right here and little serpent thing on the right. And how within the middle of their flames, you see the maxim, which is either rising and or coming down, as well as the craters that are on the moon. So that just makes you feel ancient weapon energy, while at the same time it feels both very ancient weapon and both very mystical, in the same way that like Garcia Saturn's fruit would be, or one of the Gorosei members' fruits would be, right? Like you could see these being actual creatures that lived in this world and caused this catastrophic damage, while at the same time also potentially being the ancient weapons that, as we know, destroyed so much of the stuff from back then. And it's like, man, dude, and that's the craters on the moon. It's like, what caused those craters? Was it the ancient weapons? It's like so many things, man. And then there's this, I can't stop thinking about the factory, bro. This factory drawing on the right is so incredibly fascinating to me, because this factory drawing for me represents, without question, either the first world or the third world. No question. This is either the origins of One Piece, or this is the end of One Piece. That is what this factory represents to me. This is either what we're going to see at the end of the series, when futuristic technology is back and humans are utilizing technology once again, the same way they did back in the past, thanks to either the Mother Flame, whatever the case may be. And we have this as like the actual maybe potential end of the series, right? And this panel on the right, or it represents how things were back in the day, which we know that's how things were back in the day, as shown through the annual cover story and over on Egghead. So it's like that both has prologue and epilogue implications for being a log town of sorts, of a representation of both the beginning of the series and the end of the series right here, man, with this factory on the right. And I just love the drawing. I love the comic book esque nature of the drawing. It draws me in, and I can't stop thinking about it, because it does feel like it's a ship. It does feel very One Piece in the way that it's designed. And I really appreciate it, because it very well could be a ship, as we talked about last night. It could be Pluton. It could be the Water 7, right? That moves on, as Quack 2 brought up, if I'm not mistaken, last night. And it's like, man, dude, so very fascinating. another thing that now that we have this mural that I've been thinking about as well, that I've seen quite a few people brought up today while I was scrolling through, is so last night we went back and we were looking at the NL cover story hieroglyphics. We went back and saw Skypias. But another arc also that has some really interesting hieroglyphics is Alabasta, right? That has like those, right whenever before you enter the mausoleum and you look up and you see those drawings of those two individuals before, like it was like I'm trying to remember, it was like a tomb or a shrine, whatever it is. All of those things have extreme potential first world importance, right? Like specifically the ones from the NL cover story and the Alabasta drawings, those feel very first world, very origins of One Piece, and in its nature. With that being said, I'm gonna say this. I've talked about this at length multiple times, but I'm gonna reiterate it here with this new information. I strongly believe when we get to the Heaven Realm, there's either going to be another mural like this that is going to give us another piece of the puzzle, or when Vivi reunites with the crew, she might even be with us when this happens, and we go to the Heaven Realm, we're going to get a Mont Blanc Noland Kalgara-esque flashback of what took place in the first world. I am so on. I've been considering and thinking about that and talking about it for a very long time, about that taking place on Elbaf. But after this chapter, I'm like 90% sure that it could potentially happen in this arc. And the reason why I say that is because after this arc will be Void Century, because I'm assuming Void Century flashback happens whenever we go find the One Piece. So this is going to be our last opportunity to truly speculate on what took place. And I think what would be interesting to see is that our final piece of, dang, what really happened during the Void Century would come from us getting the Nika flashback. Because we end the Nika flashback on introducing a Joy Boy, on certain characters that are exclusive to the second world, to certain elements that then become very relevant within the second world, as well as maybe like Ibu's rise to what would eventually become the king of the world. So many different things that would make us invested in elements, multiple different elements, multiple different mysteries that continue to evolve, such as the Devil Fruit origins, the D. How could I not bring up the D? The D was pretty much almost shown to us what it is in this chapter. The people of the half moon. But if within this arc, we go up to the Heaven Realm and we get to see the actual origins of the One Piece world with the first world flashback that ends in a way that will transition us into the second world flashback, which is the Void Century flashback when we get to it for the One Piece, or whenever we find the One Piece. I think that's a really good way of going about it, because once again, we'll have that emotional attachment to certain elements of that old world. We'll have the context of how things changed from the beginnings of the One Piece story, both how things eventually became futuristic, how people went to the moon, all those different things, how it then became the way that it became in the Void Century, and how things reset after all of that ended. I feel like having that context coming out of Elbaf is going to make us even more excited for the Void Century, because I know this mural potentially made the Void Century my most anticipated thing. And for you all know me, for the longest time, the two things I wanted to see the most were obviously the One Piece being revealed, Shanks meeting Luffy, and Luffy's dream. Like, those were the things I was looking forward to seeing the most in the endgame. And the Void Century obviously was really high up there as well. But seeing a mural like this and the continuous things that we've seen throughout Egghead and ever since like the Nika stuff has been introduced to us and Joy Boy and all that, the voice entries continue to be one of the things that I've looked forward, that I can't wait to see the most. And I feel like it is right there at the top of the list now as like the thing I want to see the most, because of the way that Oda's been building it up, because of the way that he's been having it interweave with the narrative and with certain themes that are so integral to the story itself. I just really rock with it, man. And I'm telling y'all right now, I would not be surprised, like I said, if this is the arc where we get the first world flashback in a Mont Blanc Nolan Calgara-esque way, maybe even from the eyes of that kid who drew that drawing. And then when we go to Laugh Tale and we get the actual Void Century flashback, we will have so much more appreciation for it. So much more appreciation for it, because we will have the context of what's currently happening in the One Piece world and the third world, as well as what took place in the first world, right? And when the second world fills in the remaining pieces, by the time we leave Laugh Tale and or head into the insanity that is the final war, we'll have the context of the two worlds and the potential of the two sovereigns that could never meet, or the individuals that could never meet, right? And or the things that could never meet. So when those things take place in the third world, after the first and second world flashback, then we'll be like, oh man, dude. Because I do think if Oda tells the first world flashback and the second world flashback, it'll be way too long to have back to back. That for me feels like a 30 chapter long flashback, right? Where you get like 10 for like, or 15 for the first world, and I think that's flipping voice-centric flashbacks into like 10, 20 chapters, right? So with that being said, I think having them split into two separate arcs, or having one being told in Elbaf, the other one being told in Laugh Tale, to me would allow it to feel not only give it the respect and appreciation that each one rightfully deserves, and how we would like to dissect and continue to solve certain mysteries and have certain answers, but also bringing up even more mysteries. Because I do think Oda's one of Oda's greatest mysteries is Laugh Tale itself, right? And I feel like once we see the first world and what was there, the things that were there, the things that were possible that time, that is going to give us a major clue as to where Laugh Tale could be, as well as what it potentially is housing. Because Laugh Tale could very well be, going back to the Castle in the Sky stuff we talked about a few months ago, it could end up being a very futuristic-esque place that is very representative of that ancient kingdom, as Vegapunk was talking about, while also maintaining the ruins of like the first world civilization and elements of the second world civilization. Like Laugh Tale is going to be like at the heart and soul of the representation of all of it, from the first world to the second world to the third world. It's going to be at the main central core of all of it. It's why the One Piece was left there. It is so incredibly key, and it's going to contain elements from all three. It might even have its own murals. It'll have its own, just the island itself. You will be able to see that it is from that part of the world, right? Whether it is the first world, second world, whatever. It's at like the main central point of all three, which is incredibly interesting to me. And then speaking of Laugh Tale, first and foremost, the Roger memes that I've been seeing today, hilarious. Last night, I think it was Mist that brought up that people were slandering Roger. And I was like, why are they slandering Roger? And I see it now. I've been laughing at those memes all morning, man. And they have been phenomenal, dude. Hey, listen, y'all know how much I love Roger, but man, oh man, I was crying, bro. Some of those memes, man, they were great. Y'all were cooking with the Roger slander. That was hilarious, dude. Absolutely hilarious. But on a serious note, I remember when that chapter dropped, and that was the first time I actually talked about the possibility of the One Piece world being having like futuristic technology that would make someone laugh, right? Like when chapter 967 dropped and we talked about all that stuff, and we had a conversation here on the channel where we talked about the how Roger saw like flying cars and like the futuristic stuff and laughed. He was like, what in the flying flat earth is this guy talking about? Like, I can't even comprehend what this guy's saying. And that for me is what led to him laughing, right? And then there was another part of it that made me feel like he was laughing out of respect, right? Where he didn't want to. It was such a tragic story that when Odin spoke of them laughing, it wasn't actually them laughing, right? Like they might have been actually crying, and Odin was like capping that the story was so tragic that that instead of laughing, they were actually like tearing up, and the panel was what I'm not gonna say it was fake, but it potentially leaving out certain pieces of information for us to see like the laughing section of it, where Roger was like laughing at the absurdity of it all, right? As the crew attempted to process all of the emotions that they were getting from there. Because man, you look at this mural and potentially some of the stuff that Roger and them saw, and it's like no wonder they all had trouble processing all this. We're having trouble processing all of this, and we have more context. They had less context, man, going in there and be like, flying flagners is this Joy Boy guy talking about? And then there's the potential possibility of course, we don't know which Joy Boy Roger was talking about. We don't know if he was talking about the Joy Boy from 800 years ago or the future Joy Boy. And the reason why I'm saying this and why I continue to say this is because why else would Odin know that 20 years in the future, the individuals from this generation would be the ones to take out Kaido? How else would he know that? That means there's something written there on Laugh Tale that speaks on the prophetic nature of the future of One Piece and the individuals who will rise once again, just like here in the third world text that we see, right? Like, it had to be something there, man. So it's like, which Joy Boy is Roger referring to? That's another question for another day. But that's also a really interesting part of that thing, which is also up to interpretation and the way that Roger receives all of that stuff, right? Which is why I love Rayleigh's response to it all, where he says, you know, hopefully you guys come up with a different answer than we did. Right, like a different answer than the Roger Pirates did based on their experiences. That they shouldn't rush towards going towards the One Piece, because all these experiences would lead towards them coming up with a different answer, different conclusion than the Roger Pirates did. And that goes right into the idea of this mural and why I think the mural is so integral and key to the overall story of One Piece, as well as what the One Piece itself could be, and what it's meant to evoke out of people. That once we see it, what Oda has told us is that we're going to come up with a different interpretation, a different answer than the Roger Pirates did as to what to do with this, what to do with this information, and how to react to this information, and react to the stuff that is there on Laugh Tale, and react to the One Piece itself. And so I'm obviously in love with this final panel, but I with this mural, but I'm even more infatuated with the idea of how this connects to so many other different elements of the series, because it truly does feel like a representation of what the One Piece is. It truly does feel like a representation of what the series is. It truly does feel like a representation of what Oda is trying to say with this story, all within a single mural. And so when we do get to Laugh Tale and we see what the One Piece is, and we look back and recontextualize everything that we saw leading up to that point, when we see the full picture of the Void Century flashback, when we see Laugh Tale and what it's actually housing there, when we see Luffy's dream and potentially even Instant Messenger Sama's dream, and how all of that connects to this greater picture that of course is showcased here from this mural, and we come back with that information that recontextualizes everything that comes before it, it might even give us a greater appreciation for this spread. Like, this is a spread that is probably going to get better with time. This is a spread that is going to get better the more we learn about the Void Century. And I don't know about anyone else, but if the Void Century is drawn in this type of style, I'd be so down for that. Obviously, I love One Piece's art style, and I'd be down for another a flashback just drawn in the regular One Piece art style. But if Oda decides to change it up and we get a Void Century flashback drawn in this style, how cool would that be? It would make it feel like a fairy tale. It would make it feel so larger than life. It would truly make it feel like a story, like a fable. It would be so cool, man. It would be so cool. But yeah, man, how many people stop thinking about this chapter, and obviously we'll continue to discuss it and think about it. But the main takeaway that I haven't been able to stop thinking about is just just how just how much this mural not only not only allowed us obviously stuff like theory fuel and things for us to discuss for years to come, but it also gives us an appreciation of what the series itself actually is, which is a powerful story that's meant to be interpreted which is meant to have multiple different interpretations based on your experiences and who you are. And when you discuss those things with each other, how you can potentially share with it within those interpretations and be open to other interpretations. That's literally what Wano is all about. That's what Oda's been trying to say with Elbaf so far. That's what so many aspects of the series have been. And when you have a Luffy here, and or a Nika, and or a Joy Boy leading all these individuals against Imu, what we have here in this mural are three kings at the forefront. The king on the right, which we don't know if that's a Lily, and or the king of the ancient kingdom, that is on top of Zunisha, with the Arc Maxim there on the right side of the page. We don't know if either the serpent or the dragon could be potentially kings of their own respective things. But we know that Imu was the king of the entire world and has been for a very long time. And the representation of what it means to be a king to the majority of the people within the verse, to the people who look up to this heroic figure, to those like Jewelry Bonnie and Kuma, and people who were enslaved, whether within their hearts or literally looked up to Nika as their king. The individuals of the past and the 800 and the Void Century flashback, the Emmets, the Lilies, potentially all those individuals who followed Joy Boy as their king, the king that they wish to follow to the ends of the earth, to see all of those things come into fruition that he wished to create and potentially bring together, how he brought all these other people together. And then of course Luffy. Every single fantastic main antagonist in this series has been a representation of what a king means to them versus what a king means to Luffy, and how we see the way that people gather around Luffy, and how he values other people, how we see what Oda believes the king should be, how he asks us as the viewer of our interpretations of what a king should be through comparing the Wapples, the Doflamingos, the Enels, the Crocodiles, all of those characters with your Elizabellos, with your King Rikus, with your Cobras, with your all of these actual kings, and then you bring individuals into you bring the Emus, then you bring the Luffys, then you bring the Conqueror's Hockey, which is having kingly ambitions, right? With your Zoros, with your Shankses, with your Rogers, these characters that represent other sides of being a king. All of these things have to do with what does it mean to be a king, and what does that mean to you, right? What is your treasure? What is your crown? What do you value more than anything else? What is the thing that you hold at the highest forefront? And we know that for Luffy, it's always two things: his food and his friends. His friends are his treasure. His straw hat is his treasure because it's given to him by his greatest hero, by the person he looks up to the most, and a person that he really thinks of as a friend, a person he values so much. And of course, he values the Straw Hats because of the friendships and the relationships that they've added throughout this entire journey. But he also really values Vivi, and he values Shirahoshi, and he values Kobe, and he values all of these different relationships that he's created. And those are aspects of a king, which I think are so incredibly beautiful, that are represented in this final mural with a Joy Boy, a Nika, or a Luffy that is bringing all the races together to go on and take on the actual king of the world, who has been ruling silently for all of these years. And I can't wait to see how that continues to be explored throughout the course of this journey. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for me today. I am so, if you want to hear more, like I said, we did a 4.5 hour stream yesterday. But those are just me waking up, taking a shower, and scrolling through while I attempt to process everything, and what I haven't been able to stop thinking about in regards to this chapter. And what I'm so excited for in regards to the future of this series. This is truly a panel that captures my excitement for the finale, my excitement to see the past, my excitement to see the origins, my excitement to see the Void Century, as well as my excitement to see the actual ending of the series when all of this comes into fruition. Because at the end of the day, this mural represents literally the first, second, and third world in regards to the large-scale battle that's going to encompass everything. Right? This will happen in the first world, this will happen in the second world, and will also happen again in the third world. And at the epicenter of that has always been a Nika, a Joy Boy, and a Luffy, and an Emu, in each and every single one of those instances. And so I can't wait for it. We're going to be exploring a topic which is obviously very important in Japanese culture, which is breaking the cycle, I'm assuming, with this, things that repeat, things that continue to happen, and how those things can be broken, how those cycles can be broken. Can those cycles be broken? It feels like that is something that can be explored here. And when you casually drop stuff like the origin of fruits and these things, and the origins of like the punishment that is given to those individuals who have fruits, and why that punishment exists, the will of D, and what that actually very well could be with like the half moon, as well as what's to come here with the end of the series, and how they will meet, and the red line and the calm belt, and it's just this chapter has everything, man. And in particular, this final page is everything you could ever ask for, and all of the mysteries that have always been at the epicenter of this series are all presented as questions and or statements within this poem, within these three poems, that the Harley texts, that just cause so much excitement to see when they're actually showcased and revealed. All of these things that have been cooked up for years upon years upon years are finally at the forefront of the narrative. And how much more exciting can that be, man? Elbaf is shaping up to be one of the all-time greats, and we're still only at the very beginning of the arc. What in the world is in store for us, man? Unreal. Unreal, dude. But we'll be back with the afterthoughts on Sunday. Please, if you would like to comment on either anything that we talked about last night in the stream or anything that we talked about here today, please let me know in the comment section down below, and or when we do the afterthoughts live on Sunday with the Viz translation versus all the different translations that we've seen throughout the course of last night. Last night, I read, of course, the regular translation that we always read, but Akash Panda sent me a couple different translations, a couple different interpretations of that final page as well. So when we get the Viz and we can compare all the translations that we have, we'll be able to get closer and closer to the truth, and continue to have our own interpretations as the thing progresses. But this is just a page for me that represents everything that makes this story, this series, so special. Not only just in terms of its weekly experience, but as well as it's just a chapter reading experience, page by page experience. When Oda does a double spread, especially nowadays, it's always impactful. And in this particular case, this is looking like the greatest all-page spread in the history of the manga, at the very least for me and what I value in this series. So ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me today. Thank y'all so much for watching. What a phenomenal chapter. What a phenomenal double-page spread. Something that I literally, like I said, I woke up and I just can't stop processing. I can't stop thinking about it. And it truly is one of the all-time greats, man. Absolutely unreal. I can't believe I'm looking at this. Like, I feel like I've dreamt of this for so long. And we've talked about this for so long here on in the community, not even just on the channel, just in the community in general, through the reveries, through collaborations, through discussions of like when we see the Void Century, we'll continue to see stuff about the Void Century, we'll continue to see the stuff about the end game and the final saga and all that. And to see the clearest representation of that here, like there is nothing more final saga than this flipping spread, man. It's unreal. It's absolutely unreal. One of the all-time greats. Thank y'all so much for watching. Sensational chapter. 1138 will go down in history, man. Hang it in the rafters. That's a Hall of Fame chapter right there.